A single dad sits beside a crying little girl in the park, unaware that her mother, the most powerful woman in the city, is watching from afar, frozen by a feeling she hasn't known in years. Hope. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The bench had seen better days. Chipped paint, weathered slats, and the faint creak it made every time Nathan leaned back. But to him, it was perfect. Nestled beneath the wide branches of an old oak tree at the far edge of Rosewood Park, the bench was their usual spot. A small escape from the noise of the world. Lily sat beside him, swinging her legs and humming softly between bites of her peanut butter sandwich. Her backpack lay at her feet, one strap dangling in the dirt, and her curls bounced with every rhythm of her feet. Nathan watched her, his coffee going cold in his hands, content just to sit and breathe. The park had started to quiet. Most parents were heading home, gathering sticky-fingered toddlers and half-finished snacks. But Nathan liked staying a little longer, when the shadows stretched longer and the air cooled. It gave Lily room to think, to be, to talk if she wanted to, or not. She had her mother's eyes, and sometimes when she stared off into the trees, he could almost feel her mother sitting on the other side of him, quiet and steady. He rubbed a thumb along the rim of his travel mug, listening to the distant bark of a dog and the rustle of wind through the trees. Then he noticed her. A small girl, no coat, no shoes, standing a few yards away with tears streaming silently down her face. She clutched a stuffed giraffe so tight its neck was bent backward. Her cheeks were red from crying, and her tiny shoulders trembled beneath a yellow dress far too thin for the chill in the air. Nathan was on his feet before he could think. Lily turned, following his gaze. The girl didn't move when he approached, just stared at him with wide, tear-soaked eyes. He knelt slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Hey there," he said gently. "Are you okay?" She didn't answer, just looked past him, as if searching for someone who hadn't come back yet. Nathan's voice softened further. "You lost?" A small nod. He offered a smile, warm and calm. "It's all right. You're safe now. Let's sit on the bench till we find who you're looking for." And somewhere behind a tree, someone was watching, staring at the man who didn't know he'd just changed everything. She appeared like a whisper, slow steps across the grass, barely audible over the breeze that danced through the trees. Her yellow dress, bright as a summer morning, looked out of place in the fading light of early evening. The hem was damp with dew, and her bare feet made soft prints in the dirt as she moved forward, hesitant and trembling. She couldn't have been older than 5. Lily saw her first. "Daddy," she whispered, tugging Nathan's sleeve, "that girl's crying." Nathan looked up just as the little girl tripped slightly over a tree root, catching herself with one arm while still gripping her worn-out giraffe in the other. Her face was blotchy and wet, and the way her chest rose and fell said she'd been crying for a while, but no sound came out. Just those wide, frightened eyes scanning every face, like she didn't trust any of them, like she'd been looking for someone who hadn't shown up. She stood still now, just a few feet away, frozen. Her lip quivered. Her giraffe, its stuffing showing at the seams, hung limp at her side, and her free hand clenched into a fist like it was the only way she could stay upright. Nathan rose slowly, palms open. He didn't move too fast. There was a language to fear, and he didn't want to speak the wrong word. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently. "You all right?" Her head shook in tiny jerks. He glanced around. No frantic parent, no sibling calling her name. Just her. Lost. Alone. Nathan crouched down to eye level, the way he used to with Lily when the world felt too big for her. "It's okay. You're safe now. My name's Nathan, and this is my daughter, Lily. Do you know your mom's name?" The girl blinked hard, then whispered, "Claire." Lily stepped closer, holding out her juice box like it was a peace offering. "Want a sip?" For the first time, the little girl's lips twitched, halfway to a smile, halfway to another sob. Nathan nodded toward the bench. Let's sit and wait together. I bet your mom's looking everywhere for you." And somewhere in the shadows, Claire Whitmore stood frozen. Because she'd found her daughter, and the man who somehow knew exactly how to hold broken things without ever touching them. Nathan stayed on one knee, steady and calm, like the earth wouldn't dare shake while he was near. The little girl clutched her giraffe like a life raft, her small fingers white around the neck of the toy, as if letting go might make her disappear entirely. She didn't speak, but her eyes said enough. Panic, confusion. The kind of fear that didn't scream, it whispered, tightening in the chest and making the world blur. Lily sat beside her on the bench now, their knees barely touching. She offered the juice box again, her voice soft. "It's apple. That's the best kind." The girl hesitated, then reached for it slowly, her grip trembling as she took a small sip. The sound of the straw crackling was the first sign that maybe, just maybe, she was still okay. Nathan's eyes scanned the park, playgrounds thinning out, joggers passing by, but no one frantic, no one shouting a name. The sun had started to dip behind the trees, casting long, sleepy shadows. He hated that she'd been alone for even a moment. He turned back to her. "Your name's Sophie, right?" She nodded once, eyes wide. "Okay, Sophie, we're going to stay right here and wait for your mom, all right? You're not in trouble. You're just a little bit lost. Happens to the best of us." Sophie leaned her head on the back of the bench, giraffe tucked under one arm, juice in the other. Her breathing had slowed, the sobs quieting into little hiccups. Nathan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small packet of tissues, handing it over without a word. She took one and wiped at her face, awkward and messy, but determined. Lily glanced up at her dad, then at Sophie. "My mom used to say that when you cry, it's just your heart talking really loud." Sophie blinked. "Mine never cries." Nathan's heart squeezed at that. "Maybe she cries quiet," he said gently. "Some people do." Sophie looked up at him, eyes still shining, but calmer now. And behind them, still hidden from view, Claire's hand clutched the edge of a nearby tree. She hadn't moved, not because she couldn't, but because something in the man's voice had stilled the storm inside her. She hadn't meant to stop. The plan was simple: cut through the park on the way back from the board meeting, grab Sophie from the nanny near the swings, and get back to the office before anyone noticed she'd stepped away. But nothing ever really went to plan with Sophie. And today, Claire Whitmore's world tilted the moment she spotted her daughter on that worn-out bench, barefoot, juice box in hand, and sitting far too calmly beside two strangers. Claire's heels sank slightly into the soft earth behind a cluster of trees. She could see them, hear bits of their conversation, but her body wouldn't move. A mechanic's uniform, a grease-stained hand brushing a strand of hair behind his daughter's ear, a tone in his voice that made Sophie stop shaking. And Claire froze. She should have run forward, scooped Sophie up, explained, apologized. But something about the man, his patience, the way he spoke with warmth and steadiness instead of panic, made her pause. Sophie wasn't scared anymore. She wasn't lost. Not really. She was with someone who'd seen her pain and met it with gentleness. Claire gripped the bark of the tree beside her, her perfectly manicured nails pressing into the grooves. Her heart thudded against her ribs in a way she wasn't used to, not from fear, from recognition. Because in all her meetings, her interviews, her deals and dinners and fast-paced life, filled with rehearsed charm and guarded words, she couldn't remember the last time she'd heard someone speak like that. No pretense, no transaction, just human, just kind. The man crouched a little as Sophie whispered something. Claire couldn't hear the words, but she saw his reaction, his smile, small and real. He reached out just enough to hand her another tissue, and that's when Claire's eyes filled. Not with tears she would let fall, but the kind that prick at the corners and remind a person what it feels like to long for something simple and impossible all at once. Her daughter was safe. But Claire suddenly wasn't sure she was. And as the man helped Sophie back onto the bench, Claire stepped back behind the tree, still unseen, still silent, yet somehow completely seen. Her heels clicked softly against the path now, the hesitation finally giving way to instinct. Claire stepped out from the shadows, her breath catching the moment her daughter's head turned toward her. Sophie's eyes lit up, and in that brief instant, Claire felt the fierce pulse of maternal relief surge through her chest. But beneath that was something quieter, older, a feeling she hadn't named in years. Sophie jumped from the bench, juice box still in hand, and ran the short distance into her mother's arms. Claire crouched low, arms wrapping tightly around her daughter, breathing her in like she'd been gone for days instead of minutes. She whispered softly, "You scared me, sweetheart," voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't find you," Sophie murmured into her coat. "I'm here now," Claire replied, smoothing her daughter's hair. "I'm right here." Only when she stood again did her eyes meet his. The man on the bench, the mechanic, his hands still resting on his knees, expression calm but alert, like he wasn't sure if she'd be grateful or furious. And next to him sat a girl, his daughter, Claire guessed, watching with quiet curiosity, her legs still swinging under the bench. Claire nodded at him. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but clear. He gave a small nod back, almost dismissive in its humility. "Glad she's all right." But it wasn't just gratitude bubbling in Claire's chest. That would have been simple, expected. No, what rattled her wasn't that he had helped Sophie. It was how he had done it. Gently, without panic, without assumption, without needing anything in return, and watching him sit there, worn boots planted on the ground, calm as sunlight, Claire felt a flicker of something that didn't belong to her world of elevator pitches and investor meetings. A longing for moments that weren't scripted, for words that didn't have to impress, for the kind of man who saw a frightened child and offered comfort without calculation. She blinked once, steadying herself. "Really," she said again, quieter this time. "Thank you." He smiled once, barely, and reached for his daughter's backpack. "She's a brave kid," he said simply. "Takes after her mom, I guess." And just like that, the ache inside Claire pressed deeper, because it had been so long since anyone had said something kind, without needing to know who she was. Claire crouched once more beside Sophie, brushing a thumb over her damp cheek, eyes darting for any signs of lingering fear. But her daughter seemed calmer now, the trembling replaced by that quiet cling children give when their world has just barely righted itself. She held Claire's sleeve tightly, not wanting to let go. "I'm so sorry," Claire said, her voice low as she looked up at the man who had calmed the storm before she could even arrive. "She slipped away when I was on the phone. I thank you for staying with her." The man nodded, casual, like he'd done nothing unusual. "Wasn't a problem. She handled it better than most adults I know." That small, unassuming smile again. Claire felt her breath snag on it. There was no flicker of recognition in his eyes, no sign that he knew who she was or why her name might matter. She was just another mom who had lost track of her kid. "I'm Claire," she said, mostly out of habit, extending a hand that felt strangely out of place. He shook it, firm and warm. "Nathan, this is Lily." His daughter waved politely. Claire smiled back, trying not to linger too long in the softness of this moment, but her heart was thudding, too loud for comfort. Not from fear anymore, but something else. Something unsettling in its simplicity. "I should get her home," she said quickly, rising with Sophie in her arms. "Really, thank you. Both of you." "Any time," Nathan said. And he meant it. Not because he was trying to charm her, just because it was true. Claire turned to leave, her heels crunching faintly on the gravel. Sophie rested her head on her mother's shoulder, clutching her giraffe again, already quieter than before. Claire didn't look back, though every part of her wanted to. Something inside her twisted, something unfamiliar and sharp. By the time she reached the car, her hands trembled slightly as she buckled Sophie in. She wasn't just rattled from the scare, it was the man, the park. The way, for a few strange moments, her life had felt nothing like a fortress, and everything like something real. Claire had always treasured the quiet moments before bedtime. They were rare in her world, soft, slow minutes when the city noise fell away and Sophie's tiny world became the only thing that mattered. But tonight, quiet didn't come, not even close. Sophie lay tangled in her bedsheets, giraffe tucked beneath her chin, eyes wide with leftover excitement. Her voice bubbled with energy, her words tumbling over one another like they couldn't get out fast enough. Mr. Nathan had this voice, Mommy. It was warm. Not loud warm, but like hot cocoa warm. And his daughter, Lily, she gave me her juice box, and her hair had a pink ribbon, but not shiny pink, soft pink, like cotton candy, but prettier. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, brushing strands of hair off Sophie's forehead, trying to keep up. She said I could come to the park again. Do you think I can? Can we go tomorrow? And maybe I'll bring her a juice box too, so we can both have one. That's fair, right? Claire smiled, her heart doing strange things again. That's very fair, sweetheart. And Mr. Nathan? Sophie went on, kicking the blanket off her legs. He said I was brave. Like really brave. Do you think I was brave? You were incredibly brave, Claire said softly, kissing her daughter's temple. Sophie paused, blinking up at the ceiling. I liked the way he talked to me, not like I was little, just like I was me. Claire swallowed, something tight blooming in her chest. It wasn't jealousy, not quite. It was something more complicated, a mix of gratitude and aching. Because in a single hour, this stranger had shown her daughter something real, and it made Claire painfully aware of how many moments she'd missed, how many minutes she'd handed off to nannies, security staff, and scheduled activities. Do you think we'll see them again? Sophie asked, yawning, but fighting sleep. Claire tucked the blanket around her shoulders. Maybe, she said, her voice gentler than she meant it to be. Maybe we will. But as she turned off the lamp and slipped out the door, her own mind echoed Sophie's chatter, Mr. Nathan, and Lily, and a man who fixed more than engines, without even realizing it. Claire's penthouse was silent, the kind of stillness that usually soothed her after long days of boardrooms and flashbulbs. But tonight, the silence was too loud. The city lights outside her window blinked like reminders of everything she was supposed to be focusing on. Quarterly reports, merger logistics, the breakfast meeting at 8 a.m. Yet her fingers hovered above the keyboard, frozen. She didn't know why she was doing this. Curiosity, maybe. Guilt, possibly. But if she was honest with herself, and she rarely allowed that luxury, it was something deeper. A thread she couldn't stop pulling. Nathan. She typed his name slowly. Nathan Hayes. Rosewood. No middle initial, no credentials, just a name and a memory of a calm voice that wrapped around her like warmth in the cold. The search results were simple. A listing for a modest auto shop on the edge of town, a blurry photo of a building with a hand-painted sign, Hayes Auto Repair, no website, no company bio, just a phone number, no Instagram, no LinkedIn, no digital breadcrumbs leading to polished self-promotion, and somehow that made him feel even more real. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. Claire Whitmore had spent the last decade navigating rooms full of polished men with firm handshakes and paper-thin authenticity. Nathan was the opposite. He hadn't cared who she was. He hadn't asked what she did. He saw a lost child, and he helped. Not for recognition, not for favor, just because it was the decent thing to do. His voice played in her head again, low, steady, kind, the way he'd knelt to Sophie's level, never once patronizing her. The way he said, "You're safe now," and made it sound like a promise no one would dare break. Claire closed her laptop, unsure what she was chasing, or why it mattered so much. But as she curled up on her oversized couch, her phone buzzed with a reminder about her investor dinner, and she silenced it without a second thought. Because in a world where everyone wanted something from her, she had stumbled into a moment where someone gave it without asking, and she couldn't stop hearing his name like a quiet refrain in the back of her mind. Nathan Hayes, a man who didn't live online, a man she couldn't forget. Claire told herself it was for Sophie. That was the line she repeated as she canceled her afternoon meeting and slipped into jeans instead of slacks, a soft sweater instead of silk. No driver today, no pressed assistant following close behind. Just her, a tote bag with snacks, and a hope she wasn't quite ready to name. Sophie had asked about the park 3 times before breakfast, twice more after lunch, and every time Claire gave the same answer, "We'll see." But by mid-afternoon, something inside her whispered, "Go," and not just for her daughter. They walked together hand in hand, Sophie bouncing with barely contained excitement, Giraffe clutched under one arm. Claire's steps were slower, measured, almost cautious. She wasn't used to this kind of vulnerability, not the emotional kind. Not the kind that makes you return to the same bench and scan the trees pretending you're not looking for someone. The park was calmer today. Fewer families. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead, sending soft, dappled sunlight dancing across the grass. Sophie tugged at her mother's hand. "Maybe they're here. Maybe Lily brought a juice box for me this time." Claire smiled faintly. Maybe. She wasn't sure what she expected. Maybe Nathan wouldn't be there. Maybe he would. Maybe it didn't matter. But she found herself looking for the familiar dark jacket, the little girl with the pink ribbon, the sound of a calm voice that didn't echo with power or performance. Then there, near the edge of the playground, Nathan sat beneath the same tree, his arm draped casually across the back of the bench, a book resting on his knee. Lily was lying in the grass nearby, building something with sticks and acorns. Claire felt her pulse pick up, not from nerves, from recognition, from the odd sense that part of her day had finally snapped into place. Sophie broke into a run, and Claire followed behind at a slower pace. Nathan looked up, spotted her, and smiled. Not surprised, not eager, just warm, like he'd somehow known she might come back, like he'd been hoping for it too. Claire hadn't expected anything. A hello, maybe? A polite nod, the kind of casual acknowledgement that 2 strangers turned acquaintances might share after one unforgettable moment. But when she reached the bench, Sophie already chattering away to Lily, Nathan stood and gestured toward a folded flannel blanket spread out under the tree's shade. "Didn't want to hog the bench today," he said with a grin. "Thought I'd bring lunch. Hope that's okay." Claire blinked. "You made a picnic?" Nathan shrugged, lifting a small cooler. "Well, I made sandwiches, brought some chips, juice boxes. Not exactly 5-star, but the company's better than room service." Claire hesitated, torn between amusement and awe. She hadn't been offered something without strings attached in years. No ulterior motive, no expectation, just lunch on a blanket. She knelt beside Sophie, brushing a leaf from her dress. "What do you think, picnic?" Sophie's eyes sparkled. "Yes, please." Within minutes, they were seated on the blanket like an oddly matched quartet. 2 kids swapping stories about frogs and playground adventures, and 2 adults still pretending they were just passers-by. Nathan handed Claire a wrapped sandwich, turkey and cheese, no mustard. She opened it slowly, the scent triggering something nostalgic. It wasn't the sandwich, it was the simplicity, the kindness, the ordinary way he made the moment feel special without even trying. "So," Nathan said, biting into his own, "you 2 come to the park a lot?" Claire nodded, careful. "Trying to lately. She loves it here." He glanced over at Sophie, who was now showing Lily how her giraffe could hop through grass. "I can see why," he said, then looked back at Claire. "She seems like a good kid, smart, kind." "She is," Claire replied, quietly proud. "She's stronger than most people realize." Nathan smiled. "Takes after her mom, I bet." Claire didn't answer right away. She was used to compliments loaded with agenda, but this one came wrapped in sincerity, and it caught her off guard. "Maybe," she said softly, watching him pass Lily a bag of chips. "She does like sandwiches." He chuckled. "Then she's clearly got good taste." And just like that, a woman who usually dined with CEOs and governors found herself on a picnic blanket with a mechanic and a paper plate, and felt more like herself than she had in years. She should have said her full name, should have introduced herself properly, like she always did, with the poise, the practiced smile, the polished tone that turned heads in conference rooms and made her a force in any room she entered. But when Nathan asked casually between bites of his sandwich, "So what do you do, Sophie's mom?" Claire looked up, met his eyes, and said simply, "Mostly just that. I'm Sophie's mom." It slipped out so naturally she almost believed it herself. Nathan didn't blink. He nodded like that was all he needed to know. "Important job," he said, taking another bite. "Probably the most important one there is." Claire smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She knew what she was doing. She knew the weight behind her silence. Nathan didn't know he was sitting across from Claire Whitmore, billionaire, CEO, tech magnate, frequent target of gossip columns and power rankings. He didn't know about the buildings that bore her name or the deals she negotiated over cocktails in cities he'd probably never been to. And she didn't want him to, because in this moment, under a tree with wind brushing through her hair and the sound of Sophie laughing beside her, Claire wasn't that woman. She was just a mom who forgot how good peanut butter sandwiches could taste when made by someone who didn't expect a return on investment. Lily passed out napkins while Sophie offered Nathan a bite of her fruit snacks. It was disarmingly domestic, 2 kids sharing, 2 adults orbiting them, quietly folding into a rhythm that felt safe, honest. Claire leaned back on her elbows, letting the sun warm her face. She used to hate the sun. It made her squint and press photos. But today, it just felt good, grounding. Nathan glanced over at her again, something thoughtful behind his eyes. "You're good with her. Some parents, you can tell when they're too busy, not you." Claire's throat tightened. She gave a small nod, not trusting her voice. He didn't press, didn't dig, didn't ask where she lived, what she drove, or what she earned. He just smiled and said, "It's nice to meet you, Sophie's mom." And for reasons she didn't fully understand, Claire wanted to stay that version of herself a little longer. It started as coincidence. Once, then twice. Then it stopped feeling like chance at all. Claire would glance at the clock near midday, glance at Sophie, and without either of them saying a word, they'd gather their things and head to the park. Nathan was always there, sometimes reading on the bench, sometimes tossing a frisbee to Lily, sometimes just waiting, cooler in hand, like he'd been expecting them. The blanket became a fixture beneath the tree, its corners weighted down with juice boxes and half-eaten granola bars. Sophie and Lily grew into a unit, an inseparable pair with secret handshakes and games that changed daily. One day they built a fairy fort out of twigs. Another day they raced in wild, looping circles around the swings. Their laughter was constant, echoing across the grass like a melody neither parent could tune out. Claire watched it unfold with cautious wonder. Sophie was lighter, less guarded, more alive. And she herself, she was changing too. She laughed easier now, leaned into the conversations with Nathan instead of measuring them for subtext. It was strange how natural it all became, unpacking sandwiches, trading bites, joking about parenting missteps like they'd known each other longer than a handful of afternoons. Nathan didn't ask questions she couldn't answer. And Claire never offered truths she wasn't ready to share. But with every shared lunch, every moment their fingers brushed when passing napkins or drinks, something unspoken grew between them. One Thursday, Nathan brought chocolate chip cookies, not store-bought, the kind with slightly uneven edges and still warm centers. Claire bit into one and actually closed her eyes. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. Nathan grinned. "Old recipe. My wife used to make them." Claire paused, eyes flicking to his. He said it gently, without sadness, but the air shifted slightly. She didn't ask more. She just nodded, held the moment carefully, then passed him the last bite of her sandwich in return. They didn't talk about what this was, didn't define it. But Claire began to notice the way Nathan looked at her when she laughed too loudly, the way his daughter leaned against her like it was second nature, the way Sophie started calling the park our place. And Claire, who had built her life on calculated control, started coming back not just for Sophie, but for something she couldn't quite name, something dangerously close to home. She didn't plan to go. The car didn't need anything. The engine purred fine, the tires had been rotated last week, and she had a fleet of professionals on call who would drop everything at the sound of her voice. But still, Claire found herself steering toward the edge of town, past the glassy storefronts and luxury boutiques, until the city gave way to old brick buildings and faded signage. Hayes Auto Repair came into view just after the curve in the road. A squat, weathered structure with a rust-stained roof and a hand-painted wooden sign that swung slightly in the breeze. There was no valet, no polished receptionist, just a single bay door rolled halfway open and the scent of grease, rubber, and something far more grounding than anything Claire had smelled in her penthouse suite. She parked across the street, heart inexplicably nervous. Sophie wasn't with her today. This wasn't part of their routine. This was her. Alone, showing up without a reason, and knowing deep down she didn't need one. Inside, the garage was clean in the way only a working man's space could be. Everything had its place, tools hung in neat rows, shelves labeled in Nathan's handwriting. An old radio played low from the corner, tuned to some station that favored blues and gravelly-voiced singers. The hum of an air compressor buzzed in the background. Nathan stood at the far end, bent over the open hood of an old pickup, sleeves rolled past his elbows, grease smudged along his forearm like war paint. He looked up when the bell above the door jingled, and the slow smile that spread across his face made something flutter in Claire's chest. "Well, this is a surprise," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Didn't peg you for a walk-in." "I was in the neighborhood," she offered, the lie thin but harmless. He nodded, not pushing. "Car trouble?" "No," she said, then hesitated. "Just curious?" Nathan tossed the rag onto a nearby workbench. "Welcome to the shop, then. Not much to look at, but it's mine." Claire stepped further in, eyes tracing the walls, the details, the life built bolt by bolt. "It's more than not much," she said softly. "It's honest." He raised an eyebrow. "That a compliment or a warning?" She smiled. "Both." And in that quiet little garage, surrounded by tools and stories and unspoken truths, Claire realized this wasn't just a man with calloused hands and a kind voice. It was a man who'd built a world that didn't need polishing, one that made her wonder what she'd been missing all along. Claire sat on the edge of the workbench, legs crossed at the ankles, watching as Nathan tightened a bolt with casual precision. The garage was quieter now, the truck fixed, the tools wiped clean. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken, casting long golden rays through the open bay door, making dust particles dance in the air like tiny secrets. She had the words in her mouth. Had them formed and waiting. "There's something I need to tell you, simple, direct." She rehearsed it over and over in her mind. "I'm Claire Whitmore, not just Sophie's mom, not just a woman with a daughter and a good appetite for peanut butter sandwiches, but Claire Whitmore, CEO, Forbes list regular, the face on magazine covers he probably didn't read." She tried to picture the look on his face, the shift, the hesitation, the slow retreat, maybe not from her, but from the version of her he'd been slowly unfolding in his own time. Nathan looked over his shoulder and smiled, that same steady expression he always wore around her, like she wasn't someone to impress or win, just someone to sit beside, to laugh with, to share a cookie with in a park full of shade. "So," he said, reaching for a rag, "Sophie's mom shows up without Sophie. That mean this is a social call?" She opened her mouth, heart hammering. Just say it, she thought. Say it now, before it gets harder. But instead she shrugged, her smile betraying her nerves. "Maybe I was just checking up on my favorite mechanic." He laughed, the sound low and soft, and that warmth, so unassuming, so real, settled around her like a comfort she hadn't known she was missing. "I'll take that as a compliment," he said, tossing the rag aside. Claire nodded slowly, folding her arms to keep her hands from shaking. The truth was there, pressing at the back of her throat, but every time she looked into his eyes, it softened, not out of shame, out of fear that this thing between them, this slow, fragile bloom, might wilt under the weight of the name she carried. So she said nothing. And for the first time in years, silence didn't feel like control. It felt like hope. The stars were just starting to appear, faint freckles against a deepening sky, when Claire pulled into the gravel lot outside the garage. She wasn't dressed for the chill. Ankle boots, tailored coat, scarf that looked more decorative than practical, but she held the takeout bags like a peace offering. Inside, the scent of garlic and soy wafted upward, Sophie's favorite dumplings, but tonight they weren't for Sophie. Nathan looked up from under the truck, the hum of his socket wrench pausing as he slid out and wiped his hands. He blinked once at the sight of her, then smiled like it wasn't a surprise at all. "Dinner delivery?" She held up the bag. "I figured you might not have eaten yet." "You figured right," he said, standing and brushing dust from his jeans. "What's the catch?" "No catch," she replied, already knowing how strange it must seem. This woman in city clothes with no reason to be here and every reason to be somewhere else. He nodded toward the back of the garage. "Come on, best table in the house." She followed him outside, the night air sharp and clean. Behind the building sat an old pickup with a flat bed dusted in sawdust and the faint scent of pine. Nathan pulled a worn blanket from the cab and spread it over the edge of the truck bed, patting it like an invitation. They sat side by side, feet dangling over the edge, the food warm between them in white paper cartons. No linen napkins, no wine glasses, just chopsticks, shared smiles, and the sound of night settling around them. "This is unexpected," Claire said, biting into a dumpling. "That's the point," he replied. "Too much of life is scheduled down to the minute. Out here, you just eat what's hot and talk about whatever's real." She laughed softly. "You really live by that, don't you?" Nathan looked out at the trees swaying beyond the lot. "I've got a garage, a good kid, and a folding chair that hasn't collapsed yet. What else do I need?" Claire didn't answer. She just passed him another container and smiled. And in that quiet moment, on a truck bed under a cold sky, it didn't matter what her last name was. It just mattered that she was there. Saturday mornings at the Hayes house were sacred. A slow ritual of pancakes, mismatched mugs, and cartoons humming softly in the background. Nathan stood at the stove, flipping a pancake that was slightly too brown, when Lily, still in her pajamas with a juice mustache on her upper lip, looked up from her coloring book and asked the question that nearly made him drop his coffee. "Is Sophie's mom going to be my mom too?" The words hit him square in the chest. His hand froze mid-sip. Coffee sloshed dangerously close to the rim of his mug, but he didn't move, just stared at her, heart suddenly pounding harder than it had all week. Lily said it so plainly, like she was asking if they were going to the park today or if they could have syrup on both sides of the pancake. No big deal, just curiosity, just a little girl trying to put puzzle pieces together. Nathan cleared his throat, setting the mug down before it betrayed him further. "Where'd that come from?" Lily shrugged, not looking up. "You smile a lot when she's around, and she always brings extra snacks, and yesterday she fixed my braid and said I looked like a princess." Nathan swallowed hard. "That doesn't mean she's going to be your mom, Lil." "But she could be," she said, still matter-of-fact. "Right?" He knelt beside her, brushing a crumb from her cheek. "Claire is... she's special, yeah, but things like that, big changes, they take time. We don't know everything yet." Lily looked at him, serious and wide-eyed. "I like her. And Sophie. And you're happier. Like when Mom was still here." That last part made his heart twist. She said it so gently, not with sadness, just truth. Nathan pulled her into a hug, pressing his cheek to her messy curls. "I don't know what's going to happen," he whispered, but I promise I'll always tell you the truth, and we'll figure it out together." Lily nodded against his chest. "Okay, but if she does become my mom, can I still call her Claire sometimes?" Nathan let out a quiet laugh, his eyes stinging more than he'd admit. "Yeah, kiddo, I think she'd like that." The conference room smelled like citrus polish and stress. Glass walls, polished steel. The kind of room built for power plays and carefully worded ultimatums. Claire sat at the head of the table, her signature already on 3 contracts, but her mind miles away, somewhere near a small garage, a truck bed, and a little girl with wide eyes and too much wisdom. Across from her, Peter Dalton, head of investor relations and certified bulldog in a suit, was speaking too fast and too forcefully. He always did when he was nervous, and today he had reason to be. "The gala is non-negotiable, Claire," he said. "The Stockholm Group wants FaceTime. You miss this, we risk the entire energy deal." Claire didn't flinch. She'd heard versions of this speech before, but something in her had shifted. The air in this room felt stifling now, even more than usual. The idea of putting on a gown, shaking hands, and flashing her rehearsed smile for men who only saw dollar signs, it made her stomach turn. "I've already met with them privately," she said evenly. Dalton didn't miss a beat. "But they want the optics. They want to know you're still in the game, that Whitmore Ventures hasn't gone soft." Claire's gaze flicked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. Soft. That word again, as if kindness was a flaw, as if spending time with her daughter and eating dumplings on a truck bed somehow unraveled the empire she'd built. "They're investors," Dalton pressed. "They want certainty. This isn't the time to go rogue." She looked at him then, truly looked. How tired he seemed, how frantic, and yet here she was, the one expected to perform, to wear the armor, to keep pretending this boardroom still felt like home. "I'll think about it," she said, standing. Dalton's jaw tightened. "Claire, I said I'll think about it." She walked out before he could respond, heels clicking across the marble like a quiet rebellion. Her assistant tried to hand her a file on the way to the elevator. She didn't take it. Because for the first time in a long while, Claire didn't want to close another deal. She wanted to be somewhere honest, somewhere real. She wanted to be at the park. Nathan was elbow deep in a disassembled carburetor when his phone buzzed. He wiped his hands on a nearby rag and glanced at the screen. Claire. They'd texted before about park meetups, school snacks, the occasional funny thing their daughters said. But this message was different. It was short, simple. "Hey, are you free Friday night?" He stared at it longer than he needed to. In the background, Lily hummed along to a cartoon playing softly in the corner of the garage office. Nathan set the carburetor down, thumb hovering over the reply button when another message followed. "It's not a date, just a dinner. Company." He couldn't help but smile. He could already hear her voice in the words, cool and casual, but just underneath, something unspoken. A pulse she never quite let surface. He waited a few beats before responding. "Dinner sounds good? Do I need to wear a tie?" Her answer came quickly. "Only if it's covered in motor oil. I hear that's very in right now." Friday came faster than he expected. The garage was quiet when Claire pulled up in a black sedan that was far too sleek for the cracked lot. She stepped out in a navy blue dress that wasn't flashy, but still made him forget how to breathe for half a second. Her coat was open, the breeze tugging at the hem. She looked both powerful and strangely vulnerable, and it knocked something loose in him. She smiled as she approached, hands tucked into her coat pockets. "Still not a date." Nathan chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Just dinner. Got it." She didn't explain where they were going, just told him to get in. As they drove through town, headlights washing over storefronts, Nathan watched her in the glow of the dashboard. Her face was calm, but her fingers tapped lightly on the steering wheel, like her heart was moving faster than her mouth would admit. "You nervous?" he asked, half teasing. Claire glanced at him. Would it ruin everything if I said yes? He shook his head, quietly stunned by her honesty. Not even close. And in the quiet of that car, on the way to nowhere too fancy but somewhere that mattered, Nathan realized she wasn't inviting him out of obligation. She wanted him there, not for show, not for strategy, just there. The restaurant was one of those high-ceilinged places with soft jazz floating in the background and waiters who moved like shadows. Claire had been there countless times before. Investor dinners, charity events, quiet deals inked over imported wine. But tonight felt entirely unfamiliar. Because tonight she wasn't trying to close anything. She was just trying not to fidget. She sat near the window, the candlelight flickering softly against the delicate glassware, her phone face down on the table. Her eyes kept drifting to the door every few seconds, heart ticking a little faster each time it opened. And then he walked in. Nathan Hayes in a suit was something she hadn't quite prepared for. It didn't fit perfectly, just slightly loose in the shoulders, the tie knotted a bit too high. But he wore it like he wore everything, without pretense. His hair was combed back awkwardly, like he'd wrestled with it in the car mirror, and his nervous smile was painfully, wonderfully sincere. Claire felt herself exhale, and then, before she could stop it, smile. Nathan scanned the room and spotted her. For a moment he paused like he wasn't quite sure he belonged in a place with gold trim on the menus and a chandelier dripping above him. But then she waved, small, quick, and that seemed to be enough. He crossed the room, hands brushing the sides of his jacket like he wasn't sure what to do with them. "Hey," he said, standing beside the table. Claire stood to greet him. "You clean up well." He chuckled, tugging at his collar. "Borrowed it from my neighbor, said it was for a wedding, didn't tell him it was dinner with a mysterious woman who shows up at his garage with dumplings." Claire laughed, genuinely. "Well, for the record, you're pulling it off." He slid into the seat across from her, eyes flicking over the candles, the silverware, the people around them dressed like they walked out of magazines. This place. Fancy. She leaned forward, her tone low and teasing. "Still not a date." He raised an eyebrow. "Sure doesn't feel like just dinner." And when their eyes met across the flicker of the candlelight, something warm and dangerous passed between them, like maybe, just maybe, they'd both stopped pretending. The gala was a symphony of crystal and ambition. Champagne flutes chimed like distant bells. Designer gowns shimmered under soft chandeliers, and every conversation hummed with subtle power. Claire had been to hundreds of nights like this, nights where smiles masked strategy and every glance came with a price tag. But tonight was different. Tonight she arrived with Nathan. He didn't say much as they walked in, but Claire could feel his hesitation. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the art, the suits, the curated elegance. He didn't fidget, didn't shrink, but he stood just slightly off-center, like he was still deciding whether to stay. Claire touched his arm gently. "You okay?" He looked down at her, his voice low. "You sure you want me here?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes." They made their way through the room slowly, Claire nodding to board members and investors, all of whom looked at Nathan with thin curiosity, curious not about him, but about his proximity to her. He wasn't a face they recognized, and that alone made him dangerous. Near the center of the room, a portly man in a three-piece suit stepped forward. "Claire," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, "didn't expect to see you here with company." She returned the smile with one of her own, controlled, effortless. "This is Nathan," she said clearly. "A friend." The word landed softer than the clink of glass, but it echoed in Nathan's ears. Not mechanic, not date, not anything more or less, just friend. The man gave Nathan a half nod. "Pleasure." Nathan offered his hand with quiet confidence. "Likewise." They moved on, but whispers trailed behind them. "Claire's type? She's never brought anyone before." "Where's he from? He doesn't look—" Nathan caught the murmurs. Claire did too, but she didn't flinch. She leaned in, whispering with a smirk, "You're causing a stir." He raised an eyebrow. "For standing here?" She smiled, looping her arm through his. "Exactly." And in that room of tailored reputations and glittering masks, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in years, pride that had nothing to do with power. The string quartet began to play something slow and expensive. Notes drifted through the air like perfume, soft and delicate, weaving through conversations and clinking glasses. The floor cleared just enough to make space for the brave few who would pretend the room wasn't watching them. Claire stood near the edge, fingers curled around her wineglass, eyes following Nathan's every glance. He was trying to look comfortable, trying not to notice the way people were still whispering when they thought he couldn't hear. His suit was creased now from the drive, his tie slightly loosened, but he stood tall, real. She set her glass down and walked toward him, slow and deliberate, like each step belonged to another life, one where she wasn't Claire Whitmore, empire builder. Just Claire, the woman who had started to breathe again in a park beneath a tree. "Dance with me," she said. Nathan blinked. "You're serious?" She offered a hand. "Only if you are." He took it, rough palm meeting hers, and they stepped onto the floor together. The music folded around them like a blanket, violins cradling the quiet. Claire rested one hand gently on his shoulder, the other in his. Nathan moved stiffly at first, like a man trying not to step where he wasn't invited. "You're tense," she murmured. "I'm dancing in a room full of billionaires," he said, voice low, "wearing a suit that doesn't fit, with a woman half the room would pay to talk to." Claire smiled. "You forgot one detail." "What's that?" "I asked you to be here." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw it again, that question in his eyes, the one he never voiced. "Why me? Why this?" "I don't belong here," he whispered. Her reply came fast, soft, true. "Neither do I." They danced in silence for a while, swaying under chandeliers that shimmered like judgment. But in Nathan's arms, Claire felt grounded, not displayed, not dissected, just held. And when the music ended, when the clapping rose around them, neither of them let go right away. The air outside was cold and crisp, a relief after the velvet heat of the ballroom. Claire's heels clicked softly against the stone path as she stepped away from the double doors, the muffled swell of string music fading behind her. Nathan followed a few steps behind, his hands in his pockets, his jacket still open, like he didn't care about the chill in the air or the stairs they'd left behind. They stopped near the edge of the parking terrace, just beneath an old oak tree whose branches reached wide and tired into the night sky. Most of its leaves were gone now, clinging desperately to the end of fall. The bark was cracked, the roots curling up through the bricks. It wasn't beautiful, but it was honest, real, just like him. Claire turned, arms folded loosely, the moonlight catching on the silver clasp of her coat. "You handled that room better than I thought you would." Nathan smiled. "I fix trucks, Claire. I've worked with men who'll scream at you for overcharging them $5. That ballroom? Just quieter wolves." She laughed, the sound rolling out before she could stop it. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, neither looked away. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For being exactly who you are, even in there." Nathan took a small step closer, slow and unassuming. His eyes searched hers, not for permission, but for truth. "I wasn't trying to be anything else." Claire swallowed, her voice suddenly thin. "That's the problem. You make me forget how much pretending I do." The wind tugged gently at her hair. She didn't move. And then, without a plan, without any of the calculation that usually guarded her every move, she leaned in. Not out of gratitude, not out of pressure, just instinct. Their lips met beneath the half-dead oak, soft and tentative at first, but deepening, like something they'd both been holding back for too long. It wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect. But it didn't lie, and when they pulled apart, Claire stayed close, forehead nearly resting against his. "I wasn't supposed to kiss you," she whispered. Nathan's voice was steady. "But you did." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I really did." The magazine sat on the counter like a ticking clock, daring him to look closer. Nathan hadn't noticed it at first. He was just there for motor oil and a new set of spark plugs. The hardware store always kept a rack of glossy covers near the register. Celebrity scandals, tech trends, luxury nonsense he never paid attention to. But this one stopped him cold. Claire Whitmore, the billionaire beneath the crown. Her face stared back at him. The same eyes that had smiled across picnic blankets. The same mouth that had whispered, "I wasn't supposed to kiss you," beneath a dying oak. Except now, she wore a power suit, diamond earrings, and a look that said she belonged to a world so far from his, it may as well have been orbiting. He picked it up slowly, like touching it would confirm something he didn't want to believe. The article blurbs were full of phrases he'd never heard from her. Tech Queen of the Decade, valued at over $4.2 billion. The woman who doesn't ask for permission. Claire Whitmore, not just Sophie's mom, not just the woman who brought dumplings to his garage and danced barefoot in the grass while their daughters played tag. His grip tightened on the glossy paper, breath caught somewhere between disbelief and something worse, hurt. Because she hadn't told him, not once, not even a hint. He thought about all the moments she'd hesitated, the times she'd looked like she had something more to say. The lie hadn't been in words. It had been in silence, in omission, in letting him believe they were two people slowly meeting in the middle, when all along she'd been standing on a mountain she never once mentioned. The cashier said something, but Nathan didn't hear it. He paid for the oil, left the magazine behind, and walked out into the sunlight feeling smaller than he had in years. She could have told him. She didn't. And now everything that felt simple, safe, and slowly growing felt like it had been built on sand. Claire opened the door with a smile that faded the second she saw his face. Nathan stood in the frame, shoulders tense, jaw tight, the kind of silence around him that warned her this wasn't a visit, not the kind with takeout and laughter, not the kind that led to dancing under trees. Her heart dropped. "Nathan?" He didn't answer right away, just stepped inside slowly, like each foot forward required permission he wasn't sure he wanted to ask for. He held something in his hand, folded, creased, familiar. A magazine. Claire swallowed. "You saw it." He nodded once. "I did." She took a breath, trying to speak calmly even as her pulse spiked. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "I tried," she said softly. "There were so many times I almost—" "But you didn't." He cut in, voice low but sharp. "You let me sit beside you in the park, in my garage, at that stupid fancy dinner. You let me think we were building something, and the whole time you were—" He held up the magazine, the cover crumpled now. "This." Claire looked down. It wasn't about hiding. It was about being seen, really seen. Not as the CEO, not as the brand, just as me. Nathan let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's the thing, Claire. I thought I was seeing you. I thought you were being honest. Turns out I was the only one showing up without a mask." She stepped closer. "Please don't do this." "I don't know who you are," he said, each word like a closing door. Claire's voice broke. "I'm still me, the woman who ate sandwiches in your truck bed, the one who kissed you and meant it." He didn't move, didn't soften. "You lied to me. That kiss, that moment, I believed it. I believed you." She reached out, hand trembling. "Nathan." He stepped back. "I can't do this with someone I can't trust." And then he turned, walked through the door, and left her standing in the quiet with everything she had built suddenly crumbling around the one thing she never meant to lose. The park felt emptier now, like something essential had been quietly removed. The tree still stood, the same dappled light flickering through its leaves, the same breeze tugging at Lily's curls as she sat cross-legged on the picnic blanket. But the laughter was missing, the shared snacks, the eager footsteps racing across the grass. Lily drew slowly in her sketchbook, her pink crayon moving in circles that didn't look like anything. Just motion. Just habit. Nathan sat beside her, sipping lukewarm coffee and pretending the silence didn't stretch longer with every passing minute. Finally, Lily looked up, her voice soft. "Why isn't Sophie coming anymore?" Nathan froze, the question landing like a pin in his chest. He had no good answer. No simple story to stitch over a torn place. How do you explain that grown-up hearts break in ways kids shouldn't have to witness? That sometimes the people you start to need are the ones you have to let go of? That trust, once cracked, doesn't always heal in time for the next picnic? "She's just busy," he said weakly. Lily tilted her head. "But she loves the park." "I know. She loves the tree." "I know," he said again, quieter this time. "And she likes my drawings," Lily added, holding one up, a lopsided picture of the four of them, her, Sophie, Nathan, and Claire, smiling together. Nathan looked at the drawing and felt something twist inside. He remembered how Claire laughed when she saw herself drawn with wild red hair, how Sophie had insisted her giraffe be in the picture too. It had felt like something real, something just beginning. Lily's eyes didn't leave his. "Did I do something wrong?" Nathan's throat tightened. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong." She nodded slowly, but the way her shoulders slumped said she didn't quite believe him. He pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her small frame. They sat in silence, the kind that wasn't peaceful but necessary. And as the sun filtered through the branches, Nathan stared at the empty space across the grass, wishing he knew how to explain the kind of goodbye that never really felt finished. The hiss came first, a sharp, angry sound that cut through the classical music playing low in the car. Then the thump, thump, thump of a deflating tire grinding against asphalt. Claire Whitmore pulled her sleek black coupe to the shoulder, sighing as the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Of course. Of all the days. She stepped out onto the gravel shoulder, wind tugging at her coat, the sun just beginning to dip below the horizon. Her heels sank slightly into the loose dirt as she crouched beside the front passenger side, flat as a board. She muttered something not fit for a magazine quote and straightened slowly, brushing her hands off on her coat before catching herself. No assistance, no chauffeur, no Nathan. She opened the trunk, stared at the spare tire like it was written in another language. Somewhere in the recesses of her mind, she could hear him, steady voice, grease-stained hands, that easy smile. Always check the jack before you start anything else. Claire found the jack, found the lug wrench, removed the cover from the spare, and then she just stood there. The ground was uneven. The car was heavy. And her heels, God, why hadn't she worn flats today? But something stubborn inside her flared. She crouched again, trying to wedge the jack beneath the frame like she remembered. Her hair fell into her face. Her coat caught the wind and slapped against her legs. Her palm slipped. The jack wobbled. She swore again, louder this time, and stood up in frustration. She looked ridiculous. Somewhere out there, Nathan could have had this fixed in 10 minutes flat, whistling while he worked, but she wasn't calling him. She couldn't. Not after everything she'd kept from him. Not after the look on his face when he walked away. She sat on the edge of the trunk, staring at the flat tire like it had betrayed her on purpose. Dust clung to her coat. Her knees were sore. And for the first time in a long time, Claire Whitmore felt completely powerless. She didn't cry, but she came close. And as headlights passed her by, none of them slowing, she realized something bitter and true. Power was easy, but peace. Peace had always come from someone who asked for nothing in return. The bell above the garage door jingled, soft and out of place against the rhythmic clink of tools and the hum of a radio playing low in the background. Nathan looked up from under the hood of a Chevy, wiping his hands with a rag more out of habit than necessity. He wasn't expecting customers this late, and he certainly wasn't expecting her. Claire stood in the doorway, arms at her sides, no makeup, no carefully styled hair. Her coat was wrinkled, her boots were scuffed, her eyes, those clear, sharp eyes he couldn't forget, held no defenses, just the weight of something long overdue. For a moment, neither of them moved. She stepped inside, slowly. No limo, no assistant hovering, just Claire, not Whitmore Ventures, not Forbes' darling, just the woman from the park, the one who fixed Lily's braid and once spilled soy sauce on his truck bed. "I know I'm the last person you want to see right now," she said softly, voice steady despite the tremble in her chest. Nathan didn't answer, not yet. Claire took another step forward. "I didn't come here to explain everything. I didn't come here to make excuses. I needed to say it." He set the rag down carefully, eyes never leaving her. "I never meant to be anything more than a mom in the park," she said. "That first day, that was real. And every moment after, I didn't plan it, Nathan. I didn't plan you. And when I should have told you who I was, I didn't. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't being someone. I was just me." He looked at her then, like he was seeing her for the first time and all over again, tired, human, heart in her hands. "I hurt you," she said, "and I know I don't get to fix that with a speech in a garage, but I needed you to hear me say it." Silence stretched between them. Then Nathan sighed, slow and deep, and leaned against the workbench. "You look different." Claire blinked. "I didn't wear mascara." He nodded. "That explains it." And while he didn't smile, not fully, something in his eyes softened, just enough to let her breathe again. The sky was the kind of blue that made people believe in starting over. Wisps of clouds floated above Rosewood Park, and the breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and distant barbecue. The familiar tree stood waiting, its shadow stretching like an open invitation across the soft hill. Nathan arrived with Lily by his side, a folded blanket under one arm, and a thermos swinging from the other. Lily had insisted on wearing the pink ribbon, for Sophie, she'd said, and carried a paper bag with peanut butter cookies she'd helped make that morning. Claire was already there when they arrived, kneeling beside the tree, helping Sophie lay out plastic cups and napkins with all the seriousness of a royal banquet. She looked up as Nathan approached, and something passed between them, something quiet and mutual. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. They both knew why they were here. "Hey," Claire said. "Hey," Nathan replied, setting down the blanket. The girls rushed to each other, squealing and spinning, as if nothing had changed. In their world, maybe nothing had. They just knew they'd missed each other. That was enough. The four of them sat in a little circle. Sandwiches were passed, jokes told. Sophie poured lukewarm cocoa into tiny cups with the concentration of a surgeon, and Lily declared that the cookies were probably the best in the world, no offense to anyone else. Claire pulled out a small photo from her bag, a snapshot Lily had drawn months ago, the one of all four of them under this very tree. She'd kept it, folded carefully, like something too fragile to throw away. "I never meant for things to go the way they did," she said quietly, holding the drawing out to Nathan. "But this, what we had here, it mattered. It still does." Nathan took the picture, his thumb brushing the faded crayon lines. He looked at Claire, then at the girls laughing beside them, and nodded. "This park's got a lot of memories," he said. "Some good, some harder." Claire smiled, not sad, not hopeful, just honest. "Maybe today can be one of the good ones." And as the sun dipped lower and their daughters curled up under the tree, Nathan poured the last of the cocoa and passed Claire a cup. No promises, no labels, just warmth, just presence, just the picnic they never got to take until now. The sun had begun its lazy descent, casting long golden shadows across the grass as the girls sprawled out on the picnic blanket, giggling over a shared pack of markers and a napkin they were treating like a sacred scroll. Claire and Nathan sat a few feet away, leaning back on their elbows, watching them like they were a movie they never wanted to end. Lily whispered something into Sophie's ear, and they both burst into stifled giggles. Claire raised an eyebrow, exchanging a curious glance with Nathan. "Plotting," he said under his breath. Claire smirked. "Always are." Sophie straightened, holding the napkin like a letter from the Queen herself. Lily stood beside her, hands clasped, eyes bright. Without a word, they walked the folded napkin over and handed it to Claire with the sort of solemnity usually reserved for handing over test results or treasure maps. Claire opened it slowly. Inside, written in purple marker with uneven letters and hearts dotting every I, were the words, "Would it be okay if our parents stayed together?" Below it, a tiny hand-drawn picture, 2 stick figures holding hands, 2 little girls in between them, all under a lopsided tree. Claire looked up, stunned. Nathan reached for the napkin, reading it silently. For a moment neither of them said anything. The weight of it wasn't in the ink or the drawing, it was in the simplicity, the innocence, the clarity. Claire blinked down at Sophie. Did you two write this?" Sophie nodded proudly. "We voted," Lily added, "and we decided it's a good idea." Nathan looked at Claire. No ring, no pressure, no audience. Just the warm, open eyes of 2 little girls who had seen something worth holding on to. He cleared his throat, voice soft. "Well?" Claire smiled, wide, real, unguarded. "I mean, it's hard to argue with democracy." Sophie and Lily squealed, diving onto the blanket like they'd just won the world's greatest prize. And Claire reached for Nathan's hand. No promises, no grand declarations, just an answer. Yes. The funny thing about blending lives is that no blueprint ever quite fits. Claire's mansion sat like a sculpture at the edge of the city. Polished marble floors, glass walls, art pieces worth more than Nathan's entire garage. Nathan's world, by contrast, was oil-stained concrete, shelves of old coffee cans filled with bolts, and the steady rhythm of engines coming back to life. Neither place felt quite right for both of them. At first they tried splitting weekends, Lily and Sophie bouncing between Claire's open halls and Nathan's creaky stairs. It worked, kind of, but Claire felt like a guest in his world, unsure where to put her heels. And Nathan, while gracious, never quite knew what to do with her wine fridge. One morning, Claire stood in the kitchen of her home, barefoot, and holding a cup of black coffee she didn't want to drink, while Sophie sat at the counter, coloring. Nathan had stayed the night on the couch, his shoulders visibly stiff when he came in to say good morning. She looked at him, looked at Sophie, and then said it. "This isn't working." He raised an eyebrow. "The coffee?" "No, this." She gestured around. "You, me, the two-house thing. It feels like we're all still packing a bag every time we want to feel at home." He nodded slowly. "So what do we do?" Claire thought for a moment, then smiled. "We build." It wasn't grand. It wasn't in the city or tucked behind a garage. It was a small house on the edge of town, tucked near a meadow, where the girls could chase butterflies and pretend trees were castles. A fixer-upper, Nathan called it. A blank canvas, Claire said. They painted the walls together, argued over tile, installed a swing in the backyard before the couch ever arrived. The garage stayed open. The mansion stayed hers, technically, but this was theirs. 2 girls shared a room painted in soft blue with glow-in-the-dark stars. Claire's heels lined up beside Nathan's work boots by the door. The kitchen smelled like cookies and engine grease, and love didn't need to fit in either of their old lives, so they made a new one, right in between. It started with a text from the school secretary, then a phone call from the PTA president. Then the bakery down the street asked if they could post something heartwarming on their website. Nathan had no idea what anyone was talking about until Lily marched into the kitchen holding a crumpled copy of the Rosewood Gazette, waving it like it was a golden ticket. "Daddy, you're famous." He blinked. "Come again?" She dropped the paper on the table, her finger landing on the bold headline, printed just beneath a slightly grainy photo of him crouched beside Sophie under the old oak tree. Single dad comforts lost girl. Her mom was a billionaire. Nathan stared at the words, heart thudding. Claire appeared in the doorway, still pulling her hair into a bun. What's going on? He held up the paper without a word. She froze mid-step. Oh, no. Turns out a local reporter walking her dog had snapped a photo weeks ago, the day Claire found Sophie in the park, and Nathan had wrapped calm around a child like it was second nature. The story was picked up by a human interest blog, then shared on a parenting forum, and suddenly, there they were, a single dad, a lost girl, and a twist that felt too fairy tale to be real. The article painted Nathan as a local hero, called Claire reclusive but compassionate. It praised the humble kindness of a mechanic and marveled that someone who could afford anything chose trust instead. By noon, it had gone viral. News vans showed up, emails poured in, requests for interviews, offers for talk shows. A national magazine wanted to do a spread titled Love Park Benches and Second Chances. Nathan stood in the garage doorway staring at his phone, scrolling through messages he didn't know how to answer. Claire stepped beside him, arms crossed, unreadable. This is something. He exhaled, glancing at her. You okay with it? She smiled softly. I've been in headlines before, but this is the first time the story actually feels true. And Nathan, he didn't care about the attention, not really. He just cared that the world had finally seen what he saw all along. Her, them. Something real. Years passed and the story softened at the edges, like an old photograph left in the sun. But it never faded. The little house between Claire's world and Nathan's became a home, filled with muddy boots, glitter explosions, weekend pancakes, and mismatched furniture no one wanted to replace. The swing in the backyard creaked with use. The oak tree in the park stood taller than ever, its branches now carved with initials and hearts. Some theirs, some left by dreamers who'd heard the story and come to see it for themselves. In a bright classroom one spring morning, Sophie stood in front of her classmates for a project called How My Family Began. Lily sat beside her, holding the poster board decorated with crayon hearts and a printed photo of that park bench. Our moms and dads met in the park, Sophie said confidently. Well, actually, I got lost first. A few kids gasped. She grinned. Don't worry, I found someone good. Lily added, Our dad helped her. He was a mechanic with strong arms and a soft voice. And her mom, Claire, she was a secret billionaire. A collective whoa rippled across the room. But she didn't tell him that part, Sophie said, because she just wanted to be Sophie's mom for a while. And then, Lily added, they ate sandwiches and cookies under a tree and accidentally fell in love. Their teacher smiled. And what does your family story mean to you? Sophie looked at Lily, then at the photo again. It means people can come from totally different places and still fit. It means you don't have to be rich or important to be kind. Lily nodded. It means stories can change. That day, two girls told a room full of future dreamers about a mechanic and a billionaire, a lost giraffe and a peanut butter sandwich, a kiss under a tired old oak tree, and a life built not on status or wealth, but on quiet moments, honest words, and second chances. And long after the bell rang, their story lingered, whispered across playgrounds and dinner tables, as proof that love, truth, and a little kindness really could rewrite any ending.